ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Until 2 days ago, that sound had never been heard on this earth. Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner. It's a report from man's farthest frontier, the radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik, the first man-made satellite as it passed over New York earlier today.
First ever human-made meteor shower, which scientists now say could last 100 years. The meteor shower was caused when NASA slammed a spacecraft into an asteroid. It was a test to show whether an impact could redirect a meteor if it posed a threat to Earth.
Standing by for the first launch of humans from Space Launch Complex 40.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Full power and liftoff of Crew 9. Go SpaceX, go Falcon, go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew 9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
Well, boy, oh boy, do we have a lot of stuff to get to over the course of the next hour. And I certainly don't have the expertise nor the wherewithal to be your guide to all of the information that involves astronomy, space, and a whole lot more. So we have recruited for Cosmic Conversations, which we do each and every Wednesday morning, every 2 weeks anyway. The one and only Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. Some of the issues that you just heard, that's going to be what we're focusing on. We're also going to be taking your calls at 646-720-0635, all part of our Cosmic Conversations.
The Other Side of Midnight presents. From the spiral to the elliptical to the lenticular to the irregular to the quasars, galaxies. Where are we in the cosmic evolutionary picture? Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. The following conversations are Cosmic Conversations with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky.
Steve, I can't believe it's been 2 weeks already, but I'm glad it has because I have a lot of stuff to go over with you. It's great to talk to you again.
Well, good morning, Frank, and to everybody listening. It's great to be here in our bi-weekly reprieve, as I like to say, from the worldly to the cosmic on Cosmic Conversations. It's good to be with you.
It's great to have you. There are a lot of issues in the news that dovetail quite nicely between what you might see on the front page of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal and in anything that we might cover. One of them happens to be what occurred in the Middle East. John Catsimatidis was interviewing a general from Space Force yesterday, and he asked him a question which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm going to pose the same thing to you, and knowing full well this is out of the ballywick of what we normally cover. Iran launched this barrage of missiles at Israel, and apparently Israel, with the help of the United States, was able to stop them all. There were no casualties except for one Palestinian civilian in the West Bank. All else seems to have gone pretty uneventfully. John put forward the question, and I guess by extension the theory, that this wasn't necessarily a real attempt to do damage, that this was an attempt, that this was basically an attempt at showing face, at basically doing what Iran had done previously, which is showing that they were going to retaliate without actually trying to hurt Israeli civilians. Basically, John's question to the Space Force general was, is it possible to fire at least 180 missiles into Israel and not hit anybody? Do you have any take on this whole thing, Steve?
Well, I sure do. I mean, it's obviously the front page and everywhere in media. But here we go. Let's talk a little bit about what we believe was fired from Iran into Israel and areas there. First of all, there's a big distinction. When we have cruise missiles, they're jet-powered, they're subsonic, and they fly all the way with, let's say, their engines running. But the definition of a ballistic missile, this is something very interesting, and people may not know this. It's rockets that are powered only in the initial boost phase. So in other words, you shoot it from the ground, whether it's on a truck or a launch compound. And it has this energy where it's expending its rocket fuel, whether it's liquid or solid, to get it up into a certain altitude. And then from there, navigation, guidance, good or bad. I mean, God help the old Scud missiles. Those were terrible for accuracy. But going on to what you're saying, I don't know necessarily if they were looking just to not do damage. I think their intention, and just my opinion, that they were looking to do as much damage as they possibly could over what's happened over the last couple of weeks with them seeing the Mossad and Israeli ground forces, and Air Force taking out some of these leaders that are obviously doing some damage in a grand scale to the nation state of Israel. So the point is, I don't know. Maybe they were the Israelis, and thank God, sadly one person died. But I don't think it was just a sophisticated attempt to say, let's fire these so we don't hit anything just to scare people. But it's their version of shock and awe. And I hate to see what might be coming because, as many people speculate, this could be the opening gate of the story of eschatology, end of times, as many people predicted, not only from the Bible, but hopefully cooler heads can prevail. But not the way I think things.
So you think these missiles were fired with the attempt to do harm, not an attempt to be part of an elaborate pyrotechnics display?
Well, sure. I mean, I would think this way. It's probably more difficult to target something not to hurt anyone than it would be to what's the purpose of the missile? The missile was intended not to, if it had no explosives in it, that's a different story. But they were well armed as the sad result of what people saw hitting the ground. No, obviously, I think their intention was to do as much damage. Why would you spend, and think of the cost of these different objects.
Right.
I mean, some people talk about the cost of some of these missiles as being $500,000, $1 million, or $2 million. And obviously, if there's anger on their side, which there is, they probably wanted to hit as many people and kill as many people as they could.
Interesting. All right, we're going to take a lot of questions throughout the course of the hour. If you have questions, give us a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. Let me begin with one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I hate that we have to talk about it, but it's with these Boeing Starliner astronauts that are still stuck up there at the International Space Station. Two-part question, Steve. One, I'd like you to give us a little bit of an update as to where we are with this whole thing. I saw that there was the beginning of the process of bringing them back on that occurred over the weekend. And then someone else, another listener mentioned to me that these astronauts, the ones that are up there, are not stuck. They could literally leave at a moment's notice. I'd like you to speak to whether that's accurate or not. And then specifically with this mission that began on Sunday to bring these astronauts back, why does it take until presumably February of next year to bring them back? Why is it not as simple as them hopping on board whatever ship is up there now that brought the one astronaut and one cosmonaut up there, and they can get on there and come back? So I realize I kind of threw a threefold question at you.
Sure, no,
do what you can with what I just gave you.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd love to talk about it. Here we go. Well, let's start off with the professionalism of both of those Boeing Starliner astronauts. They're well-seasoned astronauts. They're test pilots. They understand that these things can happen. They're not in danger of dying anytime soon because they're with the regular crew of the space station on the current expedition. But let's go back and talk about what's happened, the so-called lifeboat. Over the weekend, SpaceX, in case people didn't know, launched a Dragon 9 craft to dock with the ISS. It successfully did that. That's the so-called lifeboat as we know. But it docked again at a module on the ISS called the Harmony module. So what's all this mean? It means that this particular rocket was sent up, or spacecraft, I should say, was sent up with 2 astronauts, not 4, as was originally intended, so they can make room for the astronauts when they come back from Boeing. But there's really no expediency. I know what people may wonder and say, well, heck, well, I would want to come back as soon as I could, take the next plane out of town. But in so many words. But no, these 2 astronauts that are going up there, They've already made the agreement that they're going to have to stay up there. They have, the two that have gone up there, have a lot of serious science to do, so it's already been pre-planned. But this is very interesting, too, because this particular Dragon 9 also had some issues. It got off the launch pad, but the booster rocket, Frank, the Falcon 9 itself, experienced an issue on return, nothing to do damage to the astronauts headed up to the ISS. But as we know, this particular booster, Falcon 9, lands and soft lands, onto a ship in the ocean. It missed its target and it was outside of the target area. But to end on this, which I think is still very possible or very positive, what we're seeing here is these astronauts understand this. I think it's ridiculous. I think they should have been able to come back, on the previous Starliner, but that wasn't to happen because even when that came through the atmosphere, some were saying they still had some issues with the navigation and return location to make the computer bring it down to White Sands, New Mexico. And they also had some issues when it parachuted down with the so-called balloons that made it soft land on the Earth. So they'll be there till February. Mark the date down. February 22nd, 2025 is the expected departure date. But there's nothing going on, so people understand this clearly. There's not a crisis going on here. If anything, the only problem would be it's cramped quarters. And those two individuals, you got to give them a lot of credit, the Boeing pilots
absolutely,
and astronauts. They're very sophisticated. They understand what's going on. But guess what? From the human side, we were hearing that they miss their families dearly. And I believe Sunita, she misses her dog. And, we wish them well to get back as soon as they
absolutely. All right. 646-720-0635. All right, I got to warn you about this first caller, Steve, because she is sharp. She keeps me on my toes, and if I'm ever feeling a little drowsy, before I take one of her calls, I have to make sure I have an extra cup of coffee, because if I say anything that's one syllable out of accordance with what is 100% accurate, she kills me over this. She's a former listener of the week, a lovely listener, Alyssa in Los Angeles. Alyssa, hello there.
Good morning.
Well, I'm almost speechless, almost.
Yeah, no one believes that, believe me.
Yeah, I have some left. Well, first, do you all know that Dr. Sky was a male model?
Oh, yeah, please. If you're as handsome as he is, it seems unfair that you'd have as nice of a voice as he does. But sure, yes, we've actually touched upon that before. Yes, he indeed was.
Well, you're both very handsome. So I hope you don't. There's like this cult movie, Scanners. If you have two scanners in the same room, they blow each other up. So it's kind of like two really handsome men in the same space.
Trust me, I don't think that's in danger of happening. Please. All right. What is your question, Alyssa?
Okay. There is an annular solar eclipse happening tomorrow.
Correct.
Called the Ring of Fire eclipse.
Yes. Well, Alyssa, it's an annular eclipse that's not going to be visible anywhere in North America. If we could take a supersonic jet or even something that could travel quicker than that, it will happen on the 2nd of October, as you talked about. But it's going to take place mostly over the ocean. So the path of that annularity, and what we talk about an annular eclipse, is when the moon is nearly at its apogee position, farthest from the Earth. Thus, it creates when it's sitting on top of it. It's like taking a dime and placing it on top of a nickel. You still see the ring of the nickel when the dime is in the center. But you'd have to be way south in South America to even see this. But it's sad because when you brought that up, I remember just about a year ago, we were talking about this being seen. I was over at the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta giving a presentation there. Wow. Not only Frank and Alyssa did we have so many people for Balloon Fiesta, but we had like 80,000 people off that stage. And I never could imagine. It was like a Woodstock for the sky. But Alyssa, that's happening, but it's nothing that we'll be able to see here in North America at all. It's one of those rare events, which you described better as a Ring of Fire eclipse.
Alyssa, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And who knows? We do have a lot of listeners around the world. Maybe some of them will get a glimpse of that Ring of Fire and be able to send us an image or so. All right, 646-720-0635. Steve, we are coming up on the anniversary in a day or two of Sputnik. Now, this was a game changer. This was a game changer in terms of the space race. This was a game changer in terms of U.S.-Soviet relations. This was a game changer in terms of really human technology. October 4th, 1957, 67 years ago. What happened and why was this such a big deal?
Well, it's interesting, Frank. The Soviet Union at the time actually caught us with our pants down, so to speak, as far as moving into space. America was having lots of problems with launch vehicles, trying to get them off the ground. And remember, the Peenemünde team, which was also part and parcel with Dr. Wernher von Braun, one of the great rocket scientists that developed our Saturn V moon rocket, there was this race, of course. We called it the space race before the race to the moon. And what the Soviets did, they launched this little thing, as you correctly identified, as Sputnik 1, meaning traveler in space. And it apparently sent a psychological shockwave around the world because headlines everywhere, if you go back and search this on YouTube or any other place that has historical data, you see big, bold headlines from the different editions of newspapers that were printed, in the old days, a couple of times a day, maybe. And it was that it actually sent panic and fear into much of the world here, the United States or North America, because now if you have something that can fly over your head, the psychology behind it was, well, what if they drop something from up there? We hadn't done it before. Right. But what's interesting, in quick conclusion here, is the Sputnik was this tiny little basketball size, bigger than that, a little bigger than that, which just sent radio signals. And there were people around the United States that were watching it. And they had these little telescopes that you could sit on a table like Spacewatch, and they would follow it. But what's really interesting about this is most people in America or North America didn't see the Sputnik itself. They were seeing the booster rocket called the R4, which was the object that was what put it up into space, because it was such a tiny little thing. And I remember visiting the United Nations a long time ago, and I think in one of the big lobbies, they had a ceremonial Sputnik. Obviously, if people never saw it, you can look it up on the internet. But it was a big game changer because, look, imagine this. This is really something that I wanted you to comment on. Isn't it amazing that in 67 years, look at what we've done in such a short time in space?
Oh, no, I mean, it's astounding to me. Absolutely astounding. All right, we're going to continue with your questions in a moment. If you have questions, there's 4 open lines at 646-720-0635. We're going to continue having with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky, in a moment. Our cosmic conversations straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Yeah, the all-true global empire. Y'all live, government of heaven on earth. Yeah, brought to you by niggas Nimrod. Already, a.k.a. Judah. Yeah, and this how it's going down. For the 2019. You know what I mean? Alright, yeah. Say, man, it's a dangerous game. Soaring in the sky among the asteroids in a paper airplane. Yeah. Trying to do the impossible for the ungrateful while remaining ever faithful. Soaring in the sky among the asteroids in a paper airplane. Trying to do the impossible for the ungrateful while remaining ever faithful.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano, where every 2 weeks in this hour we become Cosmic Conversations because our Sherpa to what is happening in the cosmos is none other than Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. Steve, 2 weeks ago, I had asked you about this pretty interesting second moon that Earth was going to be adopting for a few weeks. Sounded like a cool thing. I told my son about it because he is interested in the moon. He watches the moon. And then last couple of nights when the moon is out, we've been looking at the sky. Lo and behold, we're only able to see one moon. I go and do a little research. It turns out we can't see it. What good is a second moon we can't see, Steve?
Well, once again, many in the media give these things big electric headlines. But here's the real story behind this. There's an object only 36 feet in diameter. The poor little asteroid, which is designated, doesn't even have a real name for mythology. It's called 2024, the letter PT5, because of its designation and time and calendar of how they discovered these things. We find out, the scientists are accurate in this, that it's gravitationally going to be attracted to the Earth, forget a load of this, the next 57 days. So if you were to look for this in the sky, again, you can't see it with a small telescope, you'd have to go to one of the giant telescopes around the world, sit there, have them move this giant tonnage machine, the optics, the telescope, and try to see it. And even then it shows up as a smudge. But it's interesting because it comes from an asteroid group. Now, remember, there's asteroid groups that have different Greek names, Atens, Apollos, and they're all in different distances that are out in the solar system. Remember, the big ring is the one between Mars and Jupiter. But this one, astronomers know there's maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of these little objects that are called part of the group called the Arjuna Asteroid Group. And that's just another fancy name that they gave to this group. But, well, there you go. Poor Carmine, poor Frank, and everybody else.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
It's not going to happen. So it's science in the sense that it's great that they can figure this stuff out. But remember, from previous Apollo missions, there's still it's even more than a theory, Frank, that one of the big booster rockets, I think it was the Saturn, the 4th stage, is actually still orbiting the Earth way out in this really strange, highly elliptical orbit. So it's not unusual that the Earth can do it. But remember, it's not just orbiting the Earth. It's got the unique distinction, little 2024 PT5, that it's actually in some kind of a rotational synchronous orbit with not only the moon and the Earth, which makes that even more of a strange thing. And the only way you could explain it would be to go to a blackboard with the scientists and do the celestial mechanics. But that to me and you and listeners might look like spaghetti on the blackboard.
Well, it's interesting nonetheless. All right, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. We're talking with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. If you're interested in any of the subjects that we talk about, I would encourage you to check out the Dr. Sky Experience. It's a terrific podcast that I listen to. You can get it by either searching the Dr. Sky Experience on any podcast app or just simply by going to redapplepodcastnetwork.com. That's redapplepodcastnetwork.com and just search the Dr. Sky Experience. Comes right up. There's a lot of great content on there and a lot of great commentary. All right, 646-720-0635. Al is here in New York City. Hi there, Al.
Good morning, Al.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Dr. Kate, superstar Frank. I hope it's getting cooler out there in Phoenix for you.
Well, Al, I got to jump in here. This is like the 110th day of 110 degrees or more. It was 113 degrees, Al. This is crazy. And it's October 1st and 2nd.
For all the New Yorkers that moved to Arizona in the hopes of not only a better tax climate, but better weather, all I want to say is do you see? Look, we're very comfortable here in New York. Go ahead, Steve.
I understand. Hi there. Well, no, Al, it's a great thing. The temperatures are just off the charts here. But hopefully we'll get to enjoy something maybe by December 24th. I'll keep you posted to get normal temperatures. We'll see. But Al, you had a comment or a question? I'm always interested to try to answer.
I have a question. Yeah, I'm gonna ask the simple question. I know that about 30 astronauts and cosmonauts have died in space. Yes. 21 actually in space. The others were training. One of those 21 was a cosmonaut, and as he was re-entering, he was burning up. He spent the whole time cursing at ground control. And I wanted to know why that was, who that was, if you would know, and also why is it that the Russians insist on landing on land rather than water? And a final follow-up, why doesn't fuel freeze or gel when it's up in ice-cold space?
Well, let's start off with the beginning of who these astronauts were. And again, forgive me for not remembering their name, but I think one of them was Komarov. And their spacecraft actually was coming down out of space when they had some sort of a pressurization problem with the spacecraft. And you're right, there was a lot of chatter. I don't speak fluent Russian, but they did. And I think they were pretty much, in their last moments of life. But the other part of this is why they basically land on land. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do because we've now started to see Starliner, which made its attempt back without a crew, land at White Sands. We've been having historical landings, as you know, and many people may not know, in the water over the years. But this is an interesting story because they land there. It's kind of a weird answer, but it's really well researched. They do this because they're trying to save as much energy as far as, the money that they have. They're not going to find an easy ocean for them to put this down in. So they'd have to go way up to Vladivostok or so. For them, it's a logistics nightmare. But the part you were talking about, there was the last part about why the fuel doesn't freeze or something like that? Is that what you were asking about? I didn't quite hear that.
Way below zero up there. So why doesn't it gel or freeze, rendering the operations where they can't have it really working, Well,
that's a good question. And the reason for that is it's in high-pressure tanks. And what they're doing on those spacecraft is they're not just letting the fuel sit. There's actually motion in there. They have to, how do I say it? They have to keep the fluidity of that going, or else they might have problems. But when you look at fuels like liquid oxygen or stuff, these are temperatures that are well within the realm of space anyway. So what they're doing is they're stirring the tanks on many of these missions. The saddest one of all was Apollo 13, that actually, as Jim Lovell said many times, if people saw the Tom Hanks, video of that whole replication of that mission, they were then to stir the oxygen tanks on there, and somehow a spark occurred. And what you get with electricity, and I'm not an electrician nor an electrical engineer, you put a spark next to 100% oxygen, and you get an explosive force. So far, we've had great success with these particular spacecraft, but sad to lose the cosmonauts who unfortunately didn't. And there were others that were probably not even reported in the annals of the Soviet
Did we lose out three because of the oxygen, Chaffee, White, and Grissom? Did we lose them because of that? The oxygen.
Well, that's a sad story. The quick answer, Al, on that, and we researched it with authors. I've had them in my own programs. Here's the skinny on that. Inside that Apollo 1 capsule, which was only about 30 feet from the controllers on the other side of a wall, allegedly when the manufacturer of that Apollo craft, somehow wires were not sealed properly And when you're breathing 100% oxygen, it's alleged that there was a spark event. And that, of course, literally just ignited. And the horrible part of that, not to go into morbidity, but always truth here, that particular capsule had 2 doors in which took about 15 or 20 minutes when they would even try to open them under normal circumstances. They had no means of escape from there because you're in an oxygen fire. That's one of the most horrific things that's ever happened to our space program, other than the loss of 2 shuttles and other things in space.
Al, thank you. Appreciate the question and the comment. 646-720-0635. Steve, I saw some news this week that the largest ever black hole observed by astronomers, stretching a massive 23 million light years in length, a structure that's equivalent to 140 Milky Ways lined back to back. Now, think about that, people. 140 of our galaxies lined back to back. Think of how big the galaxy is, has been discovered. What do we know about this giant black hole? How is it not sucking the whole universe into it, Steve?
Well, here it is. It's 7.5 billion light years away. Now, if you look at the age of the universe, allegedly it's 13.77 billion years in age. So that's like the halfway mark or thereabouts. But the name for it is something interesting. It's called Porphyrion. And Porphyrion was one of the ancient Greek giants that they had in mythology. So thus the name fits. Now, here's the thing. This object has this incredible jet that pops out of it. What's a jet? First of all, let's go back to the black hole. It'll pull in, for the lack of time to explain this, any bit of electromagnetic energy, light, heat, or everything. It would be a horrific thing to fall into. And you wouldn't just fall into it. You would know well ahead of time that this thing was happening. You'd be spaghettified as your arm would go out and you would just become like a strand of spaghetti into deep space. But what makes this thing interesting is these jets that come out of these black holes, not that it almost sounds contradictory. How can something come out of a black hole? Well, surrounding it are these powerful jets of energy in space that are like gamma rays, and they're focused. They're so powerful. But that whole extension of one of these jets is like you described, 23 million light years in length, like 140 Milky Ways. Frank, it's amazing when we talk on Cosmic Conversations. This stuff is literally mind-boggling. And it's just so incredible to talk about this stuff because nobody knows why and how all this stuff is all configured together. Wow. Isn't this amazing?
It is indeed. All right, 646-720-0635. Peter is in Newburgh. Peter, what's your question?
Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Sky. I was wondering what the status of the Earth's ozone layer is, because years ago everyone was talking and worried about the hole in the ozone layer. Sure. And we got rid of the fluorocarbons, and air conditioners and all that stuff. And also, what would be the effect of high-flying airplanes like the Concorde?
Mm-hmm. Well, here we go. Let's start off with what is ozone? Actually, it's triatomic oxygen. Its symbol is O3 instead of O2. Years ago, I remember, maybe people remember in the 1970s, Time magazine had this big thing on global cooling, and we had this big hole inside, let's say, by Antarctica. A lot of places on the Earth, for some strange reason, nobody knows. Climatologists would be better to try to take a stab at this. But that thing seemingly has sealed up a bit. But it's very interesting that if you look at the atmosphere, and we were doing in the 1960s a project by Boeing, something that got canceled called the supersonic transport. And people were saying, oh, my goodness, when those aircraft would fly at, making sonic booms at the height that they would fly, maybe 50, 60,000 feet up, that they would start to decrease the ozone layer. Now, that's not a reason why we stopped the supersonic aircraft. We did it because of sonic boom difficulties. But the truth of the matter is, high-flying atmospheric aerosols from jet engines, I'm sure, do help to increase the temperature on the Earth because they're putting all these different hydrocarbons up into the upper atmosphere, which, in my humble opinion, I think people would agree, does induce the amount of heat that the Earth's not able to lose. So, yeah, you got to be careful with that stuff. Ozone, the ozone triatomic oxygen thing, it seems like that thing is sealed up a bit. But do we really know that the hydrocarbons then decrease the ozone? We're not totally sure that would be an accurate statement.
Thank you, Peter. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. There was an interesting story that I saw this week, Steve, about how bacteria adapt to life in space. How does bacteria adapt to life in space, and why do we care about that anyway at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting subject, Frank. And again, we find out that experiments on the International Space Station say that for some reason, cosmic radiation may help bacteria to mutate in space so that it's not dying. But there's a theory now, and it's pretty well established by astrobiology, that microgravity and radiation seem to do just the opposite of what might happen to, say, the humans if you're exposed to super, levels of radiation in space, that bacteria may somehow find a way to exist or even thrive in space. And obviously the word is mutate. But there's some sort of bacteria on the International Space Station, and I'm not a biologist, but they call it Enterobacter, ready for this? Bug and gensis. Now, you'd have to really look that thing up, and it's hard enough to say, hard enough to spell. But they're saying that experiments on the International Space Station to that particular strain of bacteria show that it wasn't inhibited in its growth. It was just the opposite. So maybe microgravity, cosmic radiation, may not be the wherewithal to kill bacteria. So the whole story is quite open on that bacteria, for some strange reason, have the ability to mutate in space. And one of the other theories, not really changing the subject, but adding on to another plausibility, is that when we talk about comets, which hopefully we can talk about this one in the remaining time that's in the sky now, comets may have been the seedlings of life on this planet and other planets, because what they may do is be like a gardener that has one of those little seed trays and you walk around and you just replant seeds. I know that sounds maybe bizarre to some people, but bacteria, and in this particular case, life-giving DNA or whatever is out there in the original universe when it was created in the solar system, that simply comets through a process called panspermia, may have seeded planetary things, and maybe life on this planet, not to go against philosophy and religion, may have helped to produce life or extend life throughout the universe. Interesting stuff.
It is indeed. 646-720-0635. B is in Florida. Hi, B.
Good morning.
Hi, friends. How are you?
Great. Thanks for calling.
Okay. So I wanted to ask Dr. Sky if he knew anything about the Lions Gate portal.
I must be honest always. No. Tell me more about that. I don't.
So I only learned about it like maybe a year ago.
Okay.
And I was doing a video. It happens every year around the beginning of August. Okay, that's what they call it, which is the sign of the lion, Leo the lion.
Right. Yes,
and
Leo.
they call it the Lions Gate portal. Right?
Okay.
So I have a YouTube channel. It's at BEE, Bonaventure, no D. And if you go on there, you'll see I did a video on Trump. It's like a 2.5 minute video. But I was in Connecticut, which is where I'm from. Well, I'm actually from New York, but it was in Connecticut. And there's there's a dock that goes through the town of Milford. And I put the phone in the picnic table in between the slots. And then I do my little spiel, thinking that, it was just nice scenery that people would click onto it. When I go back into the car, I see something that is incredible and unbelievable. It's this cloud. It comes through and you see it kind of turns into an eagle with the face of God.
Ooh, wow.
I'm not kidding. So I
should
want
take a look
everybody
at
to go
myself.
on and look at it. What?
Right.
And then at the end of the video, it's the cloud turns in to a figure of Donald Trump. Lying down.
Wow.
It's incredible.
All right.
I have to take a look at that.
Thank you, B.
But one thing you'll get, B and Frank, on this show from me is, if I don't know, I'll always be honest.
Yeah, that makes two of us. Believe me, I am totally
How about that?
ignorant of the Lionsgate portal. All right, 646-720-0635. Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky, is here. We're going to see the first man-made meteor shower to hit Earth in a few years. What does that mean? How do you even get a man-made meteor shower?
It's quite unusual, Frank, because NASA sent this DART spacecraft a couple of years ago, to this little binary asteroid called Didymus and Dimorphos. And their sights were set on little Dimorphos, which is maybe 400 or 500 feet in diameter. And it's even stranger to talk about asteroids that are binary. They orbit each other like this little mini moon system. But the purpose of DART was to slam an impactor. It's called a kinetic device, like, say, a solid chunk of concrete or metal, into this little tiny asteroid to do what? Not just to see and get a thrill that we destroyed something, but to actually see if we could alter the orbit of this particular object. And we do know when it hit the object, the impactor, it sent out a large stream of debris, rocks, pebbles of all sizes. So what's going to happen is the first time, accurately, that a man-made meteor shower will come to the Earth, not this year, not next year, but sometime in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, the astronomers tell us. We might be able to predict the day and night to go out and say, we did that, when you see all these meteors coming through the sky.
All right. In a moment, we're going to talk with Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky, about the lunar standstill that you're going to be able to see in a week. Believe me, this is something to take note of. If you have questions, we'll take them at 646-720-0635. This is Cosmic Conversations on the Other Side of Midnight. We'll continue straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars, and let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true.
Fly me to the moon, the great Frank Sinatra. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Every 2 weeks on this program, we have some cosmic conversations with the one and only Steve Cates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. If you're interested in any of the subjects that we're covering today, do yourself a favor and check out the Dr. Sky Experience. You can do that by just searching the Dr. Sky Experience on any podcast app, or just go to redapplepodcastnetwork.com and search the Dr. Sky Experience. Steve, why don't we begin with the moon? October 9th, there's going to be a lunar standstill. When I look at the moon, it doesn't look like it's moving too fast anyway. What's going to be the difference next week with this lunar standstill?
Well, it's just an astronomical term, and what it means is when the moon, picture yourself on a roller coaster, and you see it from the side. It's going up and down like a big wave. Well, there are certain times when the moon reaches this lower part in our sky, we mean through the zodiac constellations, on that date or evening of October 9th, we will see the moon at its lowest declination. So it'll be down about 28 degrees, which means, why they call it a standstill, is that moon is just a day away from first quarter. Simply, it means that the moon will rise farthest away from east toward the southeast that it can throughout much of the entire year. So it's just one of those things where the moon is deep down as far southeast, if you want to call it, when it rises in the sky, and it takes a very shallow arc like the winter sun would in our sky.
The lunar standstill. Stay tuned a week from now. What else over the course of the next few weeks, during the month of October, for instance, can people look forward to seeing in the night sky, whether it be with the naked eye or a pair of binoculars or anything else?
Well, Frank, here comes big news here on Cosmic Conversations. There's a comet which is now just past its closest point to the sun. It's called Comet Chu-Chin-Shan Atlas, the Chinese words Chu-Chin-Shan. It translates to the Purple Mountain Observatory in China that discovered this a year ago. This is a comet that takes 80,000 years, we believe, to go around the sun. So it just passed closest to the sun. I've been out every morning here around 5 a.m. If observers have a clear sky before sunrise, meaning only 5 or 6 degrees above the horizon, some 10 degrees to the right of where east is, you may get to see. If you look on different websites like spaceweather.com, it'll knock your socks off when you see this, how bright and long and the tail of the comet. But in weeks to come, Frank, another 2 weeks, probably by the 10th or so of this month, October, Chu-Chin-Shan will be, of course, moving into the evening sky. So we may still get to see something quite spectacular, meaning it could even be visible in broad daylight, like a comet that many people saw in 2007 called Comet McNaught. But I must make this caveat here. Do not stare with any binoculars close to the sun for obvious reasons. But I remember seeing Comet McNaught when I was crazy enough to block the sun with a building. And yeah, I did it. I shouldn't admit it. I saw the comet in broad daylight.
Oof.
That's unusual. So this could get bright. But again, like they always say, I get some emails that are not nice when I talk about meteor showers over the years. When I tell people you may get to see 100 meteors an hour, and people who live in brightly lit areas tell me I saw nothing, and they're telling me that I lied to them. And I said, no, we're just telling you in the darkest of skies. So as anything, you never know, but the prediction is that this could be a good one. And to add to that, another comet has now been seen, which also may be bright by the end of the month of October. And Frank, not to go into eschatological stories of the end of times, but comets have always been looked at in history, sadly, not by everyone, as portents of doom. And not to go with negativity, but what's going on in the Middle East. Remember, Calpurnia, she was one of the wives of Caesar, and the Shakespearean quote goes like this: "When beggars die, no comets are seen. The heavens themselves blaze forth the death of kings." And there was actually a Roman coin that was, actually popped out with Emperor Augustus on it on the front. And the comet that they believe happened at the time of Caesar's death in 44 BC. So isn't that interesting when we talk about visibility of comets and world events? This is kind of an interesting kind of subject, I think.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. All right, 646-720-0635. I have to ask you about this, Steve, before we run out of time. We know about, in looking at images of planets in the solar system, planets like Saturn, Jupiter, and I think Neptune, they're all very famous for having rings around them. Apparently, there's a report that Earth, which we've seen 100 times in images from space, maybe 1,000 times, may actually have a ring. What's this ring? Why have we never seen it?
Well, it had a ring. This is interesting. They're telling us from the astronomy world that maybe 466 million years ago, the Earth had this big ring of planetary objects like small asteroids, just like Saturn, and icy objects that were maybe from comets. But there's a story that makes this even more believable, is that geologists are saying that they see more impact areas of this kind of stuff if you look at the geology of the Earth near the equator, which would make sense if all that stuff got pulled out of the orbit around the Earth at that particular time. But today, Frank, we do actually have a ring in the sky, and guess what it is? The overpopulation in the geosynchronous area of Earth satellites. If you were to look at that in the nighttime sky, if you could see them, you would see this big band of material that would shine. These are individual satellites, which technically would be classified as a ring around the Earth. And guess what, folks? Guess what, Frank? Obviously, space is becoming very crowded, as we all know, and maybe also becoming to the point where it's overpopulated. And some phenomenon called the Kessler syndrome, which when one object hits one, the other one hits another one, and all these little billiard ball type things come shooting out, causing what? Mass hysteria and space debris, something we don't need.
Oof, wow. All right. I'm going to try and squeeze in at least one more call before we run out of time for the hour. 646-720-0635. Olaf is in Brooklyn. Hi, Olaf.
Yeah, hi. This is Dr. Sky. I want to ask you a question. In the stars, in the lifetime of stars, as they near their end, they produce heavy elements such as the ones at the high ends of the periodic table, like lead, uranium, and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so look, what happens to these stars? Look at our sun. They say it's 4.5 billion years old. It'll shine for another 4.5. What's its fuel? It's converting hydrogen to helium. When stars then lose that capability in the fusion world, they start to depend on heavier creation of heavier elements like iron and things of that type. And when they run out of that fuel, they keep expanding, let's say, keeping it simple. What happens then, if that whole nuclear process, even for a millisecond, and that's a long time, I'm saying even shorter times than that, runs out of fuel, or that whole fusion reaction goes offline, that star would then theoretically or factually, depending on what star you're talking about, literally explode, collapse. It collapse first and explode into a supernova. So you're right. As stars age, heavier elements and heavier materials start to build up. And that's the way stars seem to work. Kind of interesting, like people, if we get older and we notice our equator is wider than it was years ago, well, we might be able to need an exercise or do things to help make us healthy again. But stars do this for longer times than we're here on the Earth.
Thank you, Olaf. Steve, there was an interesting article in Scientific American, headline, "Why is it so hard to go back to the moon?" And you and I have covered this a little bit before, but I think it's a question that bears repeating. We were able to go to the moon in 1969, and for the next few years, seemingly all the time, seemed like Americans got bored with how often we were going to the moon. Why is NASA's Artemis moon program seemingly facing a lot of challenges that the Apollo missions never did?
Well, I would be wrong to say that it's mismanagement. That would be a terrible statement, and I'm not really saying that that's the cause. I think if you dig deeper into this, there's so many high-tech components that go into modern spacecraft today. Was the technology of Apollo very simple technology? Well, compared to today, obviously, that's probably one of the reasons. We have so many different people and groups and contractors and all rules and regulations, probably right. That's maybe why things take a little more time. They have to do it right.
All right. Steve Cates, check him out on the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll see him again on this program in 2 weeks. For everybody else, in the immortal words of the great Casey Kasem, keep reaching for the stars, but always keep your feet on the ground.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.